Just snacks. Hey, oh yeah, those are good. The Andes mints. Man, I can't believe it's dark at 5:30 now. 'Tis the season already. Oh my gosh.
The older one, they did something with preschool. They went and heard symphony, something about books of the symphony. They had violinists. They went to the Washington Square Library. Yeah.
Can you hear me on this? Okay.
Mine's 3, and Kaylani she'll be a year and a half next month.
Yeah.
They accidentally, they were over on Sunday, and they got her ready for bed before they left, and they dropped one of like, and it's 3 T's.
I know. As a newborn ones are tiny. I know.
Yeah, sorry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Community Homeworks. My name is Sam Dietz. I am the education coordinator here. So welcome in person and also welcome virtually. We're streaming on YouTube right now. So just an FYI to all you, we have our entire catalog up on YouTube on Community Homeworks page. So please check that out for other workshops. Otherwise, I just wanted to let you know, give you a few announcements. If you haven't signed in already, please do so. Grab your handout and as many snacks as you'd like. The bathroom is up that ramp to the right, and just keep following the signs. And actually, today was the first day of our tool library being open. So if you don't know already, we have a tool library that's just recently opened. And as education participants, you guys are first through the door. So you can sign up for membership on our website. And you can find the hours right here, and the hours are on our website also. But today is our winter maintenance workshop with Mr. Lee Taylor. I'll go ahead and let him take over, and he'll be able to answer any questions you have. So enjoy.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys for coming out. Then this is winter maintenance. It's a little bit, I think they're adjusting some of the stuff we used to do fall and winter. So bear with me a little bit on this. Did anybody come here looking for having a specific item that they wanted to know about or question that they had? Go ahead.
Cover the outside, or what do you do for the outside?
Oh, yep. We will talk about that for sure. All right.
Just in general, inexpensive ways to winterize the inside. I was looking online yesterday before I heard about this workshop about curtains that could go over a door to insulate. So just any tips like that, because our space is drafty.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? Okay. I like to go around and kind of find out how old the houses are people are living in. So 100. Okay. Okay. You probably told me, but I forgot. 99. That's right. Okay. Yeah, things can happen to them. So those are nice. Yeah, those are real. And we used to put those in where I worked before. So, all righty. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is just, those things that you can do you should be doing to be able to get ready for winter, so you're just not caught off guard, and what to look out for, damages that can happen, whatnot with cold weather. As far as, as I'm going along, as far as the weatherization goes, I will touch on that. We have a whole class. When is that coming up? Yeah, so we do have a whole weatherization class, because that's what was happening over the years, is that people kept saying, what about this, what about this? And it's like, well. So, yes, we have a whole class dedicated just to that, but we'll touch on a few things tonight. So, yeah, you can follow along in the outline. I'll actually try to follow along in that outline also. And like you said, if you have questions as we're going, please ask. I think there's a question microphone, right? So, not for me, but I guess for them, right? All right. So, as far as the winter maintenance, really that kicks in right about now. Fall's unfortunately getting close to being done. And before we know it, that 4-letter word will be with us, right? So a lot of this is just kind of a preemptive. You want to be able to get in there and be able to work on some of that stuff. As far as the tools go, we've had a couple of mild winters. They say we're supposed to have a mild winter, but who knows, right? It's Michigan, so we can have anything. So if you have those gas powered, whether it's a snowblower or whatever, right? Now is the time you want to actually start that thing up, make sure it works. And the reason for that is that, again, if you wait until you have a foot of snow, that thing's conked out. You go in to, get it repaired, and everybody else has dumped their thing off too, and it will take a long time. So, there is nothing wrong with getting that in. That way, it's up and ready when that snow actually does come. As far as you can do a lot of if you have like a snowblower, gas-powered snowblower, you can do a lot of that maintenance yourself. We do have a lawnmower maintenance, and a lot of that is kind of transferable over to a snowblower also, as far as spark plugs and all that sort of stuff. So, you can dig back and look at the lawnmower class, and a lot of that stuff is pretty much the same for a snowblower. But, you want to look at all those things. I also talk about, checking your snow shovels, all that sort of stuff. It sounds silly, but, how often have you busted a snow shovel close to the end of the winter and you're like, and you stick it in a corner, and then next winter comes rolling around, and you're like, oh, yeah, I got that busted snow shovel. That's all I got. So get them all you can, right? The other thing to keep in mind is what it is you're actually shoveling. And what I mean by that is, a lot of the snow shovels, you have your straight metal ones, you have straight plastic, you have plastic with a metal edge. There's a couple of different styles out there. The reason I bring that one up is usually what happens is over the summer, people will work on, building a deck or, whatever, some kind of, and I'm talking mainly wood structures, right? And then winter will come along, and they'll have maybe a metal shovel or a plastic shovel with a metal edge, and that tears that deck up. And then all that work that you did come spring, you're like, oh my gosh, So I suggest having, if you have that, an area where you want to shovel out those wood surfaces, just have a plastic shovel. It's going to do a lot less damage to that work that you put into that deck or those steps or whatever, right? So make sure that's good. I always make sure I have a good, full tank of gas if you have gas-powered snowblowers and whatnot. I always put gas stabilizer in the can itself, so it's just in there, because especially with our crazy winters, you may use your snowblower once, you may not use it at all, right? And that gas stabilizer that's put in there is going to help that gas from going bad and gumming up your carburetor and all that sort of stuff. So have that in that, and just it'll make it so that gas is going to stay fresh and be able to make it so that these are backwards. Yeah. Roof rakes are another one. How many here have big old icicles coming off their house? Well, right. Yeah. You have a 2-story house. Yeah. That's kind of the rub, right? A lot of issues with, it's called ice damming, and we're going to get into that. Actually, we might just jump into that right now. A lot of the issues that come with the damages that are caused by ice damming on your roof and the icicles, it really boils down to heat loss and usually poor ventilation up in your attic. It's usually a combination of those things. And if you have or have had in the past massive amounts of icicles, a few is fine, but I'm talking like the 300-pound chunks, that come flying off, late or early spring, when that thaw comes in. Early winter, like now, would be a good time to put in something, what's called heat tape. And that basically, I'm gonna draw. Don't laugh too much at my roof. So here's your roof, right? And what it is if you have gutters or whatever, but it's a wire that runs up and it goes like this, right? And all that does is it's not meant to melt the ice. It's meant to keep that ice from forming in that area so that water can drain off of your roof. All right. And that's for ice damming. And you've probably seen those. I don't think we should probably get a picture of those on the handouts for that heat tape. So, But that is a good thing. Another thing, you'll see the picture of the person with the snow rake, roof rake here. And what that is that deals with, too many things on here. That deals with how much snow is on your roof, because this is the issue right here. So you have, this is your overhang. Some houses have no overhangs whatsoever. Some have up to 2 feet. So what happens is that snow builds up on the roof, and you're always going to have heat loss. That's just a given. You're never going to stop that heat loss, right? We have orange snow today. So you have that snow buildup. And what will happen is that heat from your attic, again, you can have insulation, whatever, that heat from that attic is going to run up and it's going to start melting that snow. What happens is that snow turns into water and it starts running down until it gets to about this point right here, because there's no heat from the attic in this overhang area. So what happens is that water, once it hits this area, freezes. Now, this is a long line down your roof, right? And it slowly builds up. That's called an ice dam. What happens to after, if it gets really bad, is that water can't go down anymore because it's dammed up. So what does it do? It works its way back, pushes back underneath the shingles, and drips down into your house. All right. So that's what that heat tape that I was talking about helps prevent. And that's also part of the reason I was asking about icicling, is that, you know, if you have a very short overhang on your roof, generally you're going to have a lot of icicles hanging off. But that, like I said, that is also an indicator that if you have massive damming going on or water that is, you know, come in before, that usually boils down to a couple things. Like I said, either lack of insulation or not enough insulation. And then ventilation is the second part, because again, what's going to happen is that you're never going to stop that heat. It's always going to be escaping out. All the insulation does is just slow it down. So with good ventilation, the idea is that you're getting that, you have a roof vent or whatever, you're getting that warm, moist air out. And that is going to help with that ice damming. It's also going to help with details like condensating on the backside of your, the underside of your deck and that sort of stuff. I've been into houses where they may have great insulation, but absolutely zero ventilation. And so that heat has nowhere to go. And it will just smack up to the underside of the roof deck, condensate, and then start to rot out whatever. So usually those are indications. You know, if you have a lot of ice damming, you have a lot of icicles, that sort of stuff, sometimes that is more of an issue. And this is something we're going to get into a lot more when we talk about, or when we get into the weatherization. One of the things you can do is rough. One sec. Let me finish this train of thought. One thing you can do, it's a little bit rough if you have a 2-story house, is that roof rake. And what you're doing is, all you're really doing is removing that snow, which is making it so that there's nothing left for that. There's nothing to melt. Does that make sense? So, sorry, what's up? They do. That can be, so ventilation is generally built in, yes. How good ventilation?
Has it always been, or did that start at some point?
So even old houses, 100-year-old houses in this neighborhood, that sort of thing. They sort of had ventilation, but not really. And what can happen over the years is people will say, I need to insulate. This is a classic example, right? So, and here we go into ventilation, right? So you have, generally you're going to have an intake and exhaust, right? So this is your intake and your soffit, and you have what are called baffles, because that's going to be able to stop that insulation from going down into here. So the intake lets that fresh air in, and then It expels that out. It's just like you have to, you can't just have an intake. You can't just have an exhaust. You have to pull that air from somewhere, right? So what happens a lot of times, especially with the older houses, is that people will insulate, and I've seen all sorts of crazy things. I've seen it where people have insulated and there's nothing here to stop that insulation, like a blown-in style, and it blows all out in here and covers up those vents. I've seen it where people have blocked these off. I've seen it where roofers have come out and taken out those turtle vents, little square vents or a ridge vent. Sometimes it's a gable vent, you may have, that sort of thing on each end of the gable, letting fresh air in. So was it built in? Yes, usually. Can it have been altered in a wrong way over the years? Oh yeah. But just that understanding of what it is. Like I said, generally, the key thing to think about with an attic is you want that attic to be as cool as possible, whether it's winter or summer. So that's just the easiest way to think about it. Like you said, weatherization, we get into that a lot more. But that's just kind of the quick nuts and bolts of that. So that roof rake is one of those methods of being able to remove that food for that ice standing. So does all that make sense up to this point? All right. Well, it can be a little bit difficult to see. Generally, what's going to happen is, it's kind of interesting, actually. When you have your first snowfall, a couple inches, 2 or 3 inches, right? If you notice that in this area, the overhang area, you still have snow, and then you have nothing on your roof, and I'm sure you've all seen it, whether you paid attention to it or not, but that's an indication that you have massive heat loss, right? There's nothing in that area that's heated below, and there's snow in that, in that overhang area. If that's the case, generally, there's going to be ice damming. It is a little bit dictated as far as how steep of a pitch the roof is, but, and sometimes you can see it also. It'll just look like this wad of ice. It's a little bit difficult to see when you're standing down looking at it like that. But generally, if you have the issue of your snow being removed or melted off of your main roof, and we've had consistently cold days, that's the other part. We've had some crazy winters where we get, 70 degrees in January. Well, that takes care of the ice damming, right? Direction also, south facing is a little less likely to get it. It's going to get a little bit of that solar action to melt it. So there's a lot of little details. But yes, you can sort of see it, and that's just part of that. I talk about that, just having a decent understanding of what your house should look like, and, just sort of keeping an eye on that as you go throughout the winter months. So getting that stuff lined up, however you need to get it lined up. The other is getting your salt and whatnot together. Now, a lot of people say, I'm going to buy rock salt. Okay. If you and you go to the store and you can buy a big old 50-pound bag for what, $20 or something, or $10, right? It's really cheap. But the issue with rock salt, pure rock salt, a couple things. It only works down to a certain temperature. Once it gets below a certain temperature, it just stops working. The other thing is that it's corrosive. So let's say you put in a new driveway or a new walkway, concrete. You ever seen that concrete with those big old pits in it and stuff? That's usually an indication of rock salt. It tears that stuff up. Don't even think about your wood deck. It's not good for it, right? And if you have pets, you have your dog come in and he's like, oh, doing this sort of thing because that rock salt gets jammed in there. They do sell pet safe rock salt. They do also sell, ice melt. I say rock salt, but they do sell pet safe ice melt. And then there are other varieties out there that we'll work down to lower temperatures. You don't need to use as much. And a lot of times, it's that weird sort of bigger is better. Not necessarily, because if you have that rock salt, it doesn't work when it gets down to a certain temperature, and you're having to put on 2 or 3 times as much. So do the math, right? So think about that also. When you're getting that stuff. And, is it going to happen right away? No, this is a progressive over time sort of thing that will start tearing that stuff up. The other things you want to keep in mind are if you have a city sidewalk. Anybody got a city sidewalk in front of their house? So, as homeowners, you're responsible to maintain that. Yep, unfortunately. Yeah. Instead of rock salt, they have all different types out there. There's, like I said, you can go to any one of the box stores, just flip it over and look at it. A lot of them are getting really good at saying, hey, we're pet friendly. It's not going to aggravate the dog's paws. Hey, we're concrete safe. And it will say that right on it. Sometimes you got to flip it over, look at it a little closer, bring your readers, take a picture of it and enlarge it on your phone, whatever. But they do have them. So it's just a thing to keep in mind. And the thing that is usually hard for people, especially if they've been using rock salt for a long time, they switch over to one of those ice melt style, is you need so much less. Yes, it does cost more, but you use less. So it's that sort of give and take. City sidewalks, you're responsible for keeping those clear and free of ice. Yes, they belong to the city, but somebody's walking by and slips on in front of your house, guess who they can sue? So.
Your mailbox also includes.
Yep. That's the next one. So, and it depending on, what kind of mailbox you have. A lot of the mail people are pretty good, but I have seen it where they just refuse to deliver your mail because they don't have a path up to your mailbox. If you have like a city box, rural box and whatnot, you have to kind of keep it so that mailman is not like stretching out trying to get it into your mailbox. So, details like that. Fire hydrant is another one. If you have a fire hydrant near your house or on, in front of your house, that sort of thing, you should be keeping roughly about a 3-foot area clear around it. And it really sucks because those snow plows come by and cover it with guck. But the point is that if that fire hydrant needs to be used, let's say your house is on fire, they have to dig that thing out. Sometimes they have to find it first, then dig it out. Meanwhile, your house is burning down. So, yeah. So, yes, being a good neighbor sort of thing is trying to keep that cleared a little bit, around it. Ideally, it's a 3-foot perimeter around it. So, oh, yeah. Oh, we're not doing the.
Streets in front of our houses on our street, or the sidewalks in front of our houses. Okay, the sidewalks in front of our houses were recently repaved in some spots.
Yep.
But right in front of my house,
they
didn't repave where there's a dip, and now there's a puddle there. Whenever anything
You need to call
rains
city. Yep.
So if I'm responsible for someone slipping in front of my house, but I had no control over whether they
Yep.
took care of that dip,
Right. You need to call the city and tell them that. Get it documented.
and have them come out and fix the sidewalk.
Yeah, you have to put in like a request.
Yep.
Okay.
On 1-1 and then the city is supposed to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like what's called a tree heave. You have a city tree that is, in between the sidewalk and the road, and it's pushing that sidewalk up, and you got a lip. Technically, you're not allowed to go out there and deal with it. But
When
Oh,
the
yeah.
city doesn't immediately come out and fix my sidewalk,
they
do you have a recommendation, like, of putting some gravel there, or I don't know what, so that it's become an ice rink?
Yeah, it is one of those things. Years ago, we lived in the Edison neighborhood here, and our sidewalks were totally disintegrating. And we kept calling the city and saying, kids can't walk on the sidewalks. We can't even shovel it because it's just nothing but a rubble pile. And they're just like, nope. So we went out there late one night and fixed it ourselves, but I never said that. So yeah, you get into that, some of that sort of aggravation, but you know, it is what it is. So, oh, did I say that on camera? Oops. Send me the bill. Anyways, so part of the things that you can do, you know, and I'm talking, you know, as far as interior work, because again, you know, if we're in the depths of winter, you can't necessarily do weatherization stuff outside, right? But you can be caulking and sealing and whatnot from the inside. And again, we're just touching on this a little bit. Some of the easiest ways to find out where that air is moving into your home or out of your home, it just depends on how the pressures are, is to look for spider webs. Anybody got a basement here? Right. And I bet you money that you got certain areas, if you look up in your rim joist, you got certain areas that are just totally choked out with spider webs. The reason is that has a little bit of air movement in there, indicating that that's where either your heat is going out or the cold is coming in, you know. And that can be an indication of where you need to caulk or foam or whatever, right? So yeah, and you know, a lot of times too in the rim joist area, if I say rim joist, you know what I'm talking about? This is where you got to yell at me and say, I don't know what you're talking about. So in the basement, so let's say this is your basement, right? So and your floor joists are running like this. Now you're usually spaced out about that far apart, right? And that's the outside of your house. That's where the insulation is. So that's what's called a rim joist. And there's usually fiberglass insulation stuffed in there, if you're lucky. People have a tendency to think, oh, I have insulation in there. That stops air movement. No, it does not. Fiberglass does not at all. If you pull old fiberglass insulation out, you know what it looks like? If you had, like, say, the pink stuff, it looks black. Because in a sense, it's an air filter. All that air moving through it, the dust and whatnot, traps in that fiberglass and just lets that air move through. That is another way you can check to see if you have a lot of air leakage. If you do have the insulation, pull a piece out and look at it. Keep that orientation of how you pulled it out and look at it. And if it's all black on the bottom, bet your money it's exactly where. Because you have, let's say this is your foundation, then you have what's called a mud sill, and then you have this part that's on the outside, and your floor joists run out like this, right? So there's a lot of areas where air can move through. Anywhere where basically two pieces of material meet is a really good spot where usually there's going to be airflow. And doing caulking or something like that, you can do that in the middle of the winter. Trick is what kind of caulk you use, or foam, right? I mean, there's a lot of different styles of stuff out there. So that's one of the tricks we were talking about as far as looking for that, looking for those spider webs or pulling that insulation out and looking where that black, you know, stuff is, but also where those two materials meet. You can go through and caulk or foam that. And, you know, one of the things you can do also is sometimes we have bright sunny days in the winter. Go down there in the basement, turn off the lights. Sometimes you have to get up a little bit, and sometimes you can actually see daylight. So there are a lot of tricks that you can do to be able to find out where that air is moving through. I'm not going to talk about the hillbilly blower door test. I won't get into that, but there are ways you can do that too. So if you're going to be foaming or something along that line, great. You know, if you have larger gaps, yep, you can use foam, expanding foam of different styles. If you're going to be caulking, get a caulk that is going to last. And what I mean by that is if you go out, and I'm not picking on painter's caulk, but painter's caulk, right? This is meant for trim and painting over and whatnot. This stuff gets hard as a rock. after a couple years, right? Is it wasted money? Well, for the couple years, it did its job. So if you're going to be going through that effort and stuff, get a caulk that's going to stay flexible for, 25, 30, 35 years, 40 years, whatever, right? You also have to kind of think about, you don't want to get like a pure silicone because it has to be absolutely clean for that silicone to stick. And I've seen that before. People have gone through and done a beautiful job sealing up, say, their basement, just in that rim joist area. Problem is, it was a silicone. They didn't clean it first. And I went, that's a good job, but, and it didn't adhere. So details like that, right? But that's a real easy thing you can do. Weatherization on exterior doors, that sort of stuff. We talk about this in door repair. We talk about this also in weatherization class. Shut that door, and you can even have somebody at night with a flashlight on the outside go around the perimeter. If you're seeing that light coming through, minus the white weather stripping that you can see light, but you know what I mean. If you see light coming through it, might mean that you need to change that weather stripping out. There's weather stripping also on that bottom of that door that can be changed out. All sorts of things you can do as far as sealing up your house. Yeah.
What would be the best caulk to use?
I like, and again, so I showed you the 25-year, like Alex caulk. This is a latex plus silicone. It's a 35-year. I'll pass that guy around. It's relatively inexpensive because, yeah, some of those caulks you can spend, $6-7 a tube. You don't want one of those. Glue doesn't work. I've seen people do that, thinking they can get construction adhesive and do it. That stuff shrinks and cracks. So something that's going to stay flexible, that's a decent, and a lot of times they're going to talk about what it can do. Whether it's interior, exterior, you don't need exterior if you're doing on the inside, right? But you're going to pay more for an exterior caulk. So it's details like that, And yeah, it'll drive you nuts when you walk into the store and you got a whole wall of caulk and you're going, So that's where I like using the local hardware stores that are getting less and less, at least around here, because they can help you with a lot of that sort of stuff. All right. So again, I could keep going on that, but does that answer your question pretty good? At least to start? All right.
And the other class you mentioned, is that available on YouTube or on the website?
Yeah, we have weatherization classes. Yeah, and there's probably multiples on there. So, yep. Because people are like, it smells freaking cold. So, all right. So the other thing is that usually around now you're just about done with your hoses, right? We talk about this in fall maintenance. Drain out those hoses, connect them. Make sure the water's out of them. I connect them up, throw them underneath my deck, put them in the garage, whatever, right? Second thing you want to do is ideally find where your outside spigots are. Then you have to kind of look at it. So there are two different styles of spigots out there. Well, basically two. You have what's called frost-free spigot. What that means is that the action where it shuts that water off is way into the house, right? Versus that action being right here, exposed out where it's going to freeze, okay? I have frost-free. I still shut them off. So ideally, if you have some kind of a turn-off, and it may be a turn-off like this, where you can just go like that, shut that water off to that outside spigot. At that point, what I'll do is I'll go outside. I open that up just to get any water that's left inside of here and let it drain out. At that point, if you really want to be safe, you can get one of these little foam covers. They sell them all over the place, all different styles. Basically, all it does is you just hook this around. Some have a little wing nut screw or whatever, and it just butts up against your siding, traps that heat, that your heat loss from your house, and helps your spigots from freezing.
If we don't have the internal shut-off you're talking about, we get
Most houses don't.
This would
Yep.
do it then?
Yes, this will do it. And I have one in my front yard that Every summer, I'm like, man, I need to change that out. And do I? No. So I put that on. So.
All my old handles
Mhm.
are off, but the water still.
So you have turnoffs going to your spigots. What kind of turnoff is it? Is it like a turn? Okay, that's a gate style. You can. I would get that changed out to some kind of a ball valve. The ball valve being this or quarter turn valve. There's a lot of different styles out there, but these are real good as far as shutting it down completely. So ball valve or quarter turn valve, because I've seen it sometimes where one of these is down there. It's basically the same thing, like you would see underneath your kitchen sink or something like that. I've seen it where these are the actual turnoffs for the outside spigots. Fine. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other sort of thing. So shutting that water down is important. So, all right. As far as this goes, is there any questions up to this point? No? All right. So we talked about the sealing the penetrations a little bit. There are those window and door films you can do, the shrink wrap films. See that thing behind you there in that window, that frame? I think they probably have that on one of the YouTube channels, how to build something like that. It seems goofy, but it seems to work pretty well. So you build like a wooden frame, put that shrink wrap stuff on it, and stick it in the windows. As I said, there's all different creative ways you can be able to do to be able to help with that. Outlets are another big one. I'm gonna move your tear stuff up. So if you have an exterior wall and you have a switch or an outlet like that, put your hand by that and you ever feel air just blowing out of that thing, you can take off the cover. You'll have the outlet or the switch in there. You can actually buy those little foam pieces that will fit over whether it's a switch or an outlet or a GFI and help stop some of that air movement. You just come in little packs. So like I said, they have all sorts of interesting things that you can do with that because something like that is one of those things that can really add up. You add up, a box that's this size or bigger all the way around the exterior of your home, and all of a sudden you have, it's like leaving a window this big. Because what happens a lot of times too when they're insulating, I just moved this. When they're insulating, they'll put the insulation around this. Well, this box doesn't go back to all that sheathing back there. There's usually a gap about like that. So then you have all that air just, and there's other details you can do with it, but we're not going to get into those right now. So, all right. I keep wanting to turn this thing. Huh? Oh, I was going, why did they staple it on the right? That's weird. Oh, whatever. I'll blame it on that. So, all right. So furnaces are the next one. And we have furnace class next week? Heating systems? Okay. So we get into that a lot more also. What do you think the number one killer of a furnace is? Air filters, or the lack of, or not changing them out. So make sure you have not only the correct size, that's a big one. A lot of people will, I don't have the right size, and they leave a space, they put a filter that's, 4 inches too short in it. Well, what is that doing, right? So correct size, whether it's a 1 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, whatever, right? I usually buy a couple of them and I'll just have them stuck right here, I'll just have them sitting there, and depending on the style filter and how often you have to change it. But find those filters. And then you have to start thinking about, do you have a question?
I just wanted to make a quick plug.
Okay.
Is that okay? Community Homeworks also sells furnace filters at a very reasonable probably lower than you'd find in the store price. Just come in, and if you bring in your old filter, we could just, find the right size for you. Or if you already know, just let us know. But yeah, we sell them here. So take advantage.
So the thing about the filters is the correct size. Second thing about filters is changing them when they need it. So this is where it gets a little squirrely, and we'll get into this a lot more in the heating systems. But basically, if you have a 1-inch filter, it should be changed every 30 days of operation. And operation is the key point, air movement. So, a lot of furnaces have that option where you can go over and you can say, my basement's cold and I want to move that air around. So I put it on the fan instead of being on auto, I switch it on to on. And then what that does, if it's wired right, it moves that air through that house. It may not be heating necessarily, but it's still moving that air. That counts as operation because that air is moving through that filter and collecting whatever. So about every 30 days of operations, once a month, basically, right? See this guy? Yeah. If you're pulling your filters out and they're looking like this, you need to change them more often, right? You can even do the good old, hold it up to the light, to be able to look at it. And it boils down to how many cats you have and whatever else. How old your house is. Sometimes the old houses have some pretty nasty ductwork and that stuff gets stirred up. So yeah, you want to have a good quality filter. And what I'm talking about with that is, we'll get into the pleats. I'll use one of these guys here. So 3 basic styles. You have this guy here. Not going to catch much, right? It's going to let that furnace breathe, though. Yeah. So there are heating people out there that are like, I would rather see this in a furnace and let that furnace breathe. It's not going to catch much, but it's going to let that furnace breathe, right? But most of us aren't necessarily that lucky. So, we have allergies and whatever else, right? So then you start getting into the pleated style filters. And, this one basically it's just a larger filter that's been folded down, more space to collect more stuff, right? I think this is the style filters you guys sell, right? So this is a good mid-range style filter. I'll talk about the bigger ones here in a sec. But again, if you're pulling it out and it's starting to look like that, yeah, you got to change it a little more often. Then you start getting into those real fine filters, right? It stops mold spores and all sorts of stuff. The mesh is a lot finer mesh. It's going to stop a lot more. Think this thing's going to clog up quicker? So it boils down to what kind of filter you're using. And, there's a lot of variables in there. So, use what you want to use. But realize that if it's a denser filter that's going to pull out more of the smaller particles, you may have to change it a little more often. So, details, right? And shut the furnace down when you pull that filter out. I've seen it where, people leave that furnace running, the blower motors running and stuff, and they'll go to pull their filter out, and half of the filter is gone. Well, it's been sucked up into the blower motor in your furnace, which will throw it off balance, which will cause major mayhem, right? So shut the thing off. Let it stop. Change your filter. And yes, there are directions. These filters are directional. They'll have a little arrow, usually, saying airflow. That airflow, for the most part, pointing towards the furnace. So, like I said, yeah, see, and come to the heating class. I'll do it tonight. But so in this case, you have your return. That air is moving like this down through your filter here, right into the furnace. That blower motor's picking that up, heating it, and the heat exchanger up through the ducts and throughout your house. right? The reason for that, why does it have a direction? And this one's not necessarily a real good example. This one is you don't want these pieces to get sucked up into the filter. So a lot of times this side is the side that's going to have closer to that furnace. It's going to have a little more protection on it, so you're not pulling those parts and pieces. So, like I said, heating systems, we talk about this a lot more.
So the arrow goes
Towards the furnace is a general rule.
toward.
Yeah. So like I said, come to heating systems. We'll get into that a lot more. Where we're going to talk about airflow and movement and all that sort of stuff. So does that make sense as far as the 1-inch filters? Different styles may change a little bit as far as how often you're going to have to change them out. You may have one of these guys, and these suckers aren't necessarily cheap, but generally they're good for about 6 months of operation. So, and it's a lot of this, all the same rules apply. You just have a bigger filter, thicker. That's what this style is. Air barrier, there's a lot of different styles out there. So, a lot of times you'll just need to buy one of these right on the furnace, right on the filter, either when you installed it or when it needs to be changed, or at least looked at. Because, how often you're like, I put that in when? At least I am. So put a mark on that saying when that furnace filter was installed or needs to be changed out. Yeah.
So that's, like you said, with the smaller ones,
Mhm.
30 days of actual use. So
Correct.
The large ones, same thing.
Right.
Six months of actual use.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you can get, and that's where a lot of times they'll just say change them monthly. But again, if we have weird weather where you're not using that furnace that much, I mean, when you pull that thing out, if it doesn't look that bad at all, you maybe can give it a couple more weeks or whatever, It's one of those things. I guess if you're in doubt, change it, because you can really harm that furnace by not having enough airflow through it. It's going to starve it. It's going to make all those components work, and they're just going to break down quicker than they should. Yeah.
So sometimes they advertise like a tune-up or like
Yep.
HVAC. Is that like a real? Like, do you
Oh,
do
yeah.
that, or-
Yep. Well, I'm going to give you a good example. I was just getting into that one. So right about now is the time that you want to, before you're really getting into that, people are freaking out because it's 0 degrees outside and their furnace doesn't work, right? So very early winter or late fall, right? Have a tune-up done. Sometimes you can even get a rebate through consumers, right? And they'll come out, and what they're going to do is they're going to do performance check. They're going to check little details, igniters, flame sensors. They'll change your furnace filter. They'll do all that stuff. They're also going to do what's called a combustion test. So the place I work at the YWCA, and I had that done. And we had 6 or 7 properties, right? And worked it out, and they came out and they did all of them on one day. Well, there was a furnace that was 8 years old, 9 years old, and it had a cracked heat exchanger. Well, sort of a cracked heat exchanger. So what that was doing was it was dumping carbon monoxide into the house because it had a cracked heat exchanger. It wasn't enough to kick off the carbon monoxide detectors. That's a whole other story. But they found that. And we had to put a whole new furnace in. Kind of a bad thing, but better than not waking up because of carbon monoxide poisoning. So yeah, they do that safety check and all that sort of stuff. And it is easier to get them out when, that cooling season is done, but that heating season really hasn't fully kicked in yet. They're in that lull period. It's kind of like that same thing I was talking about with the snowblower or the lawnmower or whatever, and it doesn't work, and you're like, get in line, So yeah, having that furnace maintenance, that tune-up, at least once every couple years, And even if your furnace is a newer one, like I said, this one was relatively new, relatively speaking, it may still have a warranty on it, because, you have, depending on the furnace, you can have, a certain amount on parts, and you can have a certain amount on the heat exchanger itself, as far as if it cracks or fails, it might still be under warranty. So, and, a good heating contractor is going to be able to figure that out and work with that. Doesn't usually cover labor, but what do you do? As far as storm readiness goes, I got 5 minutes. Storm readiness is one of those things that you need to keep in mind. A lot of people have generators, or I'll pick on generators first. I say this every year. Those things are not meant to run inside. Anything that runs off of any kind of a fossil fuel, gasoline, kerosene, propane, right? What is the byproduct of that? Carbon monoxide. And yeah, every year you see it. Family dies because they had a generator running in their basement because of power outage. So fine, if you have a generator, great. Use it properly, please. And and so here's another detail. So people will say, I understand that. I'm going to hook it up outside. Great. I've seen it where they have an intake. So let's say you have a furnace, right? One's an intake, one's an exhaust. You have these two pipes sticking outside. I've seen it where they set up a generator outside, right next to the intake, pulling in that fresh air. Where do you think that exhaust goes? Back into the house. Details, right? So, yes, if you have a generator, great. Use it properly. The other thing on that is those portable heaters. And, you get into, I have cold rooms, I have this. That's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have space heaters, portable heaters, whatever you want to call them, I don't care if they're, again, if they have kerosene style heaters, right? You don't want to be running that inside. Is it going to get levels high enough to be able to cause problems? Maybe, maybe not. It dumps a lot of moisture into your house. That's a whole other issue, right? But even electric ones, make sure they have those safety features. Overheat protection, right? Somebody throws a blanket over, it gets overheated, it's going to shut off. It gets knocked over, it's going to shut off, right? Those safety features need to be built in. The problem is that they have so many of those old heaters that are just tanks and run forever. And people will buy them in a garage sale, and nobody will go, it's 50 years old, but it works like a champ. Does it have any safety features? No, maybe not. So there your house goes, right? Which gets us into the winter fires. So, this is a time when, a lot of that sort of stuff happens. We talk about space heaters, that sort of stuff. The other thing is I had it and I lost it. It's been a day already. It'll come back to me. So yeah, dryer fires, that's the other one. You should have your dryer vent cleaned out at minimum at least once a year. So you have that tool that goes in from the outside, you turn that dryer on and you get all that lint out of that dryer vent. Because again, that stuff can catch. It's usually something I like to do in fall. Summertime is just so hot. Stuff gets all over you and sticks to you. Ugh. So, yeah, keep that in mind. As far as some of the damages that can happen in the winter is the thing to think about is when it gets cold, everything gets brittle. I don't care if it's shingles, siding, vinyl siding, whatever, right? So what can happen is that let's play with shingles. Let's talk about shingles. So we were talking about the ice damming first thing in class, right? So what happens is a lot of times that ice will build up, and it may not necessarily ice dam and back up into your house. Great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But what it can do is you have your shingles coming down, and I've seen it where on the ends that ice kind of moves underneath and it grabs those shingles. And then you get these crazy thaws that we get, and they rapidly melt. And that ice chunk, sometimes it can be quite heavy. We had one when we lived in the Edison area, it was about a 300-pound chunk of ice that came off and smashed her car. So, yeah, from 2 stories up. But what happens is it'll be holding on to a shingle, and when it decides to go, it just goes. So, especially after thaws and stuff like that, do a walk around. If you're seeing those sort of things in your yard, winter winds is another one. We may not have snow, but we get those windstorms, and that brittle shingle snaps off. Details like that. So, you want to have a good mental image of what your house should look like. Your roof should look like. If you get damage to your vinyl siding or something like that because it's gotten bonked or whatever by a car door, is that something you need to fix in the middle of the winter? No. But you don't want to let it go. Put that in your checklist for things to do next summer or whatever. So, just kind of keeping those thoughts in your head as far as things that can happen. Insurance is also another one. We have a whole insurance class, right? So tomorrow, hey, well, what do you know? Make sure your insurance is up to date. And, if you've done improvements on your house and stuff, yeah, sometimes you got to add that. So I'm not an insurance person. I just know it's one of those things. Yep. Right. But yeah, I mean, you get, one of these fires that happens or whatever, and bad time to figure out your insurance wasn't necessarily right. So, yeah. I could keep going, but I've run out of time. Is there anybody else that has any other questions? Did I answer your questions? All right. We're good. 6 o'clock, man. We're done. Yeah,
thank you again, everyone, for coming. And as we've already referenced, Lee, you do a great job of referring to our other workshops that we have going on. So tomorrow at 6, we have a homeowners insurance workshop. And then next week, don't forget, we've got a heating systems next Tuesday. Earlier that day, we also have a lunch and learn. So if you want to come for a free lunch, it's catered. And we'll be learning about, it escapes me right now. It's on the schedule. I'll keep that one a surprise. But anyway, thank you again for coming, and have a good night. Get home safe.